and somewhat I had control of my pitches, but I wasn't necessarily commanding them to sides of the plate like I would eventually need at this point now. Um, so for pro ball, it was really just like increasing the frequency. So like, not just throwing, fastball slider, but mixing in the curveball and throwing the changeup a lot more consistently to keep guys honest so they couldn't cheat fastball or slider. So it became more of a chess match, I guess, where it was kind of like brains versus brains and what pitch to throw, because at that point, everybody's skill is, I guess, so finely like tuned where, just having one good off speed pitch wasn't going to be enough. You had to kind of battle of whether or not that pitch was the right pitch, because they'll hit anything. So.
Right. I got a question here from one of our catchers. And he says, what makes you as a pitcher feel comfortable with the catcher? And besides the big things, what do you do to get bigger, faster, stronger during the off season?
I kind of lost a little bit of connection. It's what makes a pitcher more comfortable with.
What makes you as a pitcher more comfortable with the catcher? Like, what's the catcher-pitcher relationship? If you're struggling in an inning or an outing, what are some things that the catcher gives you a cue on to kind of get you relaxed and get back on track?
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is really awesome. And I wish more catchers would honestly ask this question, because it's really important. I know for me personally and the guys that I work with, because I know how good it makes the pitcher feel. So typically like catchers who, whenever you hit a spot, they'll stick it, but they'll, be like, attaboy, point at you, like tap their glove, send the ball back, like good job, kind of like support, which it can be done pitch to pitch. And always being positive, when a pitcher's throwing balls or, he can't really find the zone, he doesn't need the catcher to tell him that he's not throwing strikes. Like he needs to be there to support the pitcher and, and say, it's like, all good. Don't worry about it. We're all, we're moving on to the next batter. How are we going to start this guy? And let's get ahead and put him away. So, always being positive and supportive to the pitcher and not being like, dude, figure out the zone. Like, why aren't you throwing strikes? Because obviously he's trying to. So, I mean, positive support and like pitch to pitch is always huge. And then in between, the biggest thing that I would always do for my outings is talk to the catcher and see what he sees for going down a lineup. So once through the lineup, we get a pretty good read of the guys that we're going to be facing. So I always have a plan personally on how I'm going to attack, but sometimes the catcher might notice something like, yeah, he was kind of cheating up in the box. Like, let's burn some fastballs, or, little things that the pitcher may not see. So communication in between innings, or even with the coaches, or especially with the coaches, that is also super important.
Now, you said, picking up on those little things. Is that more like an in-game thing, or is this like a scouting thing? Like coaches will let you know, hey, if this guy does this in the box, or is that just more of an in-game thing?
I would definitely say it's both. Obviously, scouting reports are super important, and you can really learn a lot from them. But I also think it's what the information that you might read on a guy may not necessarily be true for that day. So it's kind of like understanding that this is what his tendency might be, or there's a good chance he's doing this. Let's see it happen, and then we can go after it. So like, if the scouting report says he moves up in the box late in the count, for example, and we see that happening, it's like, okay, perfect. Everything lines up, and now we can go attack. But if it says that and he moves like back in the box, that's changing from throwing a fastball to a slider, and and he would get the better read on something. So obviously it would have to be once through the lineup, but definitely day to day would be really, really important.
So it's really like that in-game feel, whatever you think you're overpowering with. All right, that's pretty good information. Thank you for that. I'd like to talk about some of the sacrifices that you made in order to get to where you are today. Like, I know a lot of the guys like to hang out with their friends and stuff like that, and I'm sure you did as well. But, talk about some of the sacrifices that you made to put you where you are.
Yeah, I mean, some of the biggest, like looking back at it and understanding it at the time, was not being able to pretty much like sleep over my friends' houses on the weekends. As much as that was fun and we wanted to do that. Knowing that I had to get up early for practices, which were every Saturday and Sunday at 5, 6, 7 a.m. I mean, obviously I couldn't be out with my friends late. So, losing a little bit of time at night and then having to wake up early. But, just little sacrifices like that, or kind of making some decisions of, if I practice early in the morning, maybe not going out to, a restaurant or going over to one of my buddies' house at 10 p.m. Maybe that's not a good idea. So, it's like little sacrifices. It's really mostly with friends, from my personal experience, like sometimes having to cut back on time with them in order to make sure that you're ready for practice or game or whatever it is.
Yeah, no, I understand that. Just trying to get the guys to understand that as well. We can understand and see guys. We can tell how they are or what they did the night before when they show up to the field. So
yeah,
there's some
I
ways
mean,
we gotta
it's
get to
always
them.
pretty obvious.
At what point were you able to realize, or were you told that you had an opportunity to play pro ball, or how did you find out?
Yeah, I mean, it was obviously always a goal. I mean, everybody's goal is to go and play pro ball. And going into college, as a senior in high school, I didn't have professional opportunity. That wasn't really even an option. I was just going to school. So once I kind of got there and I was able to be surrounded by draft prospects, as a freshman, and seeing like the process that they would go through and where they would be going, with teams and the people that they were around, it kind of like opened my eyes to how cool it would be and how that's something I really want to pursue. And so once I kind of started being able to throw against these guys in inter squads and stuff, and I was seeing success, and it kind of became a reality, like, in a couple of years, you could have a chance. So it was kind of like it wasn't, I want to say like a set time, but going into college and being successful pretty early on, and then continuing to go towards and being successful against guys who do get drafted or who did get drafted. It became a kind of like this is a reality type thing. So
That's awesome.
that was
That's
really
awesome.
it.
I guess to follow up that question, you're entering your junior year. At what point did you find out, or was it any major league ball club that was talking to you or thinking about, drafting you at some point? How was that process like? How did you know, what was to come? Or did they tell you like, hey, we're taking a look at you, we're trying to see what's going on? Or what was the process of you, basically committing to them, or just having that contact with that pro club?
Right. Yeah. So my sophomore summer, I went up to the Cape Cod League, and so we had some experience with, it was testing at the time or doing questionnaires for specific teams. So we would get invited to a group of guys would get invited to answer a series of questions, in a written packet. And then sometimes they would take measurements of like our forearms, our hands, a whole bunch of stuff. And so that was kind of like the beginning of teams showing interest, like major league teams showing interest in potentially drafting you. And so that type of process continued all the way through the year. So most of the time it would just be questionnaires from certain teams. There's a website that they had just developed to help easily send questionnaires to players. So, and then every team would have one, and they would send it to you. You would answer a series of questions, and something that happened, say from August, all the way through the year, but August up until opening night, so sometime in February, and then you would really kind of be able to gauge interest based on if there were a lot of scouts there and you saw a questionnaire a day or two after, or an email saying, what's your phone number? I need height, weight, and a whole bunch of stuff, and let's set up a call this week. And so as the season progressed, more and more teams popped up, and similar things just like that had come, and so you're able to kind of gauge it that way.
All right, so I guess just piggybacking off of that, and knowing that you have a shot at pro ball as a junior in college, describe the feeling like before, a couple minutes before the draft. How did you find out that you were going to get picked? A couple minutes before, and just the feeling after, and kind of where were you, and what were you doing, with family and stuff like that. Just describe that
Yeah, I
kind of.
mean that whole day was kind of crazy. A lot of stuff. We had learned a lot of information about the teams that were right. Yeah, and so a lot of the teams that I had spoken to about a week before the draft. So I kind of had an idea of who was really interested, like who I would probably be getting some phone calls from. So moving into the draft, I mean, the day itself is, I mean, it's exciting, it's nerve wracking because you never know if you're actually going to get picked up or by who. So, I mean, really crazy. So a couple minutes leading up to a couple minutes before, I had a phone call with the Tigers, and he sounded pretty interested. And he said our picks are coming up, so we might be taking you. So I said, okay, I'm gonna watch and we'll see what happens.
So
And
it
so about
wasn't
50,
like, it wasn't for certain. It was like, we might
no,
take you. Yeah.
yeah, no, nothing was ever for certain, and that was the scary stuff, the scary part about it, because by that point in the day, it was towards the end of the 25th round. I had talked to around 7 teams at that point who all said, I'm going to take you in the next round or two. And 6 rounds had gone by. So, it's like you can't really trust everything that they say. So you just have to wait to see it happen. And then you're like, all right, there's no more like trust issues. It's done.
So was there a phone call saying like, "Hey, Brendan, we're taking you now," or was that the only phone call you received? And at the same time, who's the person that called you?
Yeah. So it was honestly about 1 minute, maybe a minute and a half after. So I got off the phone with a Tigers guy, and I kind of noticed like talking fast, like they had to try and get something done. So I hung up the phone. It was right at the end of the 25th round. Um, and so hung up, I put my head down, and I was kind of just thinking about it. I was like, he was talking kind of fast. Like, I wonder what's going on. And as my head was down, before I even knew it, everybody in my house started screaming, and I looked up, and my name had popped up. So it was pretty crazy.
That's that's awesome. That's awesome. I mean, I can't imagine that feeling. That's great. Now, you're drafted in 2019, correct? So you had some spring training experience last year. Describe what that was like, and did you have like a major league moment, like, holy crap, I'm here? Like, what was that like?
Yeah. So I mean, the biggest thing was when I finally felt like, wow, I'm here, was when we got to the locker room. All of our equipment had our name on it. We had a couple shirts, a pair of shorts, and all the stuff that we needed. So, my name being on some of the equipment was like, wow, this is pretty cool. And then, our clubhouse manager came over and said, you guys got to select gloves. Your cleats are going to be here in a couple of days. Like, welcome to the team. And I mean, that was a pretty cool moment. It's pretty surreal. Like, it was kind of hard to understand everything that was going on because there was so much. Getting introduced to the clubhouse, or all of our coaches, from our strength coaches to our pitching coaches, we kind of met everybody very quickly. So it was a lot of emotions going on at the same time. But getting into that locker room just meant like, all right, I'm here.
Now, you getting into the locker room, is that just your draft class? Are you mixed with the major leaguers, the double A guys, the triple A guys? Was there a mixture of that? Was it one whole big organization meeting? And kind of how did that go?
Yeah, so I didn't have any experience last year for spring training, but I was down there this year for about 4 days, and so because of honestly the coronavirus, we had a big organization meeting about 2 or 3 days that we were there. So that whole time, everybody was with a group, and there were big leaguers with us, AAA guys, AA guys, and some of the top prospects in the organization, and we're all standing in a group trying to learn at that time what was going on with the virus and if we were going to get sent home or not. But in general, we were kind of kept to ourselves at that point. in last year when I went there, it was late June. All of the seasons were already going on, and so it was really only the rehab guys that were still at the complex.
Now you, obviously, I don't. Did you pitch? Were you able to pitch in any simulated games or anything like that? And what was that like? Um,
So last year I played in the GCL, which is the Gulf Coast League, which is rookie ball. So I threw about 30 innings down there, which was a full summer, going from late June up until essentially September. So I was able to throw then, but this spring training I had one bullpen, and then we had all got sent home. So I haven't gotten a chance to face any live batters yet this year.
So, while you were down in the GCL, I'm not sure if you were a starter or a relief pitcher, but if you were a starter, you were told when you were going to pitch. Or even in college, you were a starter, you were told when you were going to pitch. Can you kind of take this through like that, the day of that you're going to pitch, or kind of like your routine of that day?
Of course. So lucky enough, I was actually able to do both. I was our closer for about a month. And then I became a starter for the second month of the season. So I kind of had experience with both. But I had the same routine in college as I did once I got down to pro ball. But I would typically get up pretty early. I would get at least 8 to 9 hours of sleep. I would make sure I'm fully rested and fully ready to go. I would always have a very big breakfast. So I would always have an omelet or 2 omelets, always drinking a lot of water in the morning, listening to music, just kind of getting my mind right, getting my mind ready for the game. I always got down to the locker room or the clubhouse earlier than most guys who were also starting. I would get down there about an hour and a half to 2 hours before I would even go out there. So like my warm-up routine usually takes an hour and 10 minutes. So I would start, so say the game was at 7 p.m. I would get out and start moving around at 5:50. So I was at the field and kind of ready at like 2 o'clock. So I was always kind of there early. I just like being in the locker room environment for a little bit instead of just kind of going straight from my room, and then straight out on the field. Like I didn't like that transition. But I mean, start day, I was always drinking a lot of water, trying to have a lot of chicken and pasta and a lot of carbs to help prepare me for the game and keep me, ready.
I'm glad you touched upon routine. At Westchester, we don't really give the players a stretching routine because we feel like, everybody stretches and has to prepare differently. But everybody's different. Can you talk about, when you learn that you needed to stretch, how helpful is it? And how does your body understand, that you're ready to go? We have some guys here that just want to get up and play. But what are the importances of, stretching and making sure that you're actually ready to play?
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly one of the biggest pieces for me personally. I had learned a really good process when I was about a freshman or a sophomore in high school, which was a typical dynamic warm-up, but it had paired in a lot of arm care routines, so in arm prep work. So a lot of the stuff that I started to do, I started to understand, I guess, the reasoning behind why I was doing certain exercises prior to throwing and these different types of exercises. So once I kind of understood what it was doing for me, I knew that I had to do it in order to get myself the most ready, because all that stuff is just prep and injury prevention, which is the most important thing. I mean, you can't develop and grow if you're not playing on the field. And so that once I really understood that and I knew I had to stay healthy, that was, I guess, kind of like the turning moment where I realized, I needed to be taking care of myself. I needed to always be stretching, taking care of my arm, and, preparing my body for the work that I was going to be doing that day.
Yeah, that's ultimately that's your moneymaker. You got to take care of it, right?
Absolutely.
Now, what about post game or post arm care? The day after you pitch. What is that routine like?
Mm-hmm. So the day after, I would typically do some type of running circuit, whether it was a variation of box drills or cone drills, with sprints paired with some pulls, just to kind of change or force blood flow into my body and reduce some soreness. I personally liked throwing the next day, after a start. That was kind of like my biggest way to understand, because I don't necessarily get too sore when I throw. So the next day when I'm throwing again, I mean, it was always very light, but I was kind of it would help me identify where I was, say, most sore, maybe the weakest, so that week I can try and attack that muscle group and maybe do a little bit more to prepare myself during my next outing, so that I don't have this soreness or, I guess, discomfort.
Nice. You talked about arm care and you talked about all that kind of stuff. What was kind of like the mindset? Well, you said you were obviously a starter. You were a closer. So as a relief pitcher, you don't really know if you're going to pitch that day, unless they let you know at Siena or at the pro level that you're going to pitch. But as far as my understanding and being on a few calls with major league players and stuff like that, what is that mindset like, not knowing if you're going to, pitch that day, especially as a reliever?
Yeah, and that was the biggest adjustment for me personally, because I had never relieved in college or in summer ball or anything. So trying to learn that was really important. And so one of the things that I started to doing was kind of always going to the field, I guess, with like a consistent or steady mindset. Like days after I start, I don't have a care in the world, because my job is done. But as a reliever, I'm always kind of hovering at like a 50-50 zone, where relaxed but also focused at the same time. And so as the game progressed, every day, whether or not I was going to be hot, I would still go through a typical routine, my typical warm up, just to be ready if my name was going to be called, because I never knew if it was. So I figured I might as well just be prepared in case they call me. So I would always get hot around the 5th, 6th, 7th inning, depending on how the game is going. If it's going slow, I would take my time. Quicker, then I'd go earlier. So pretty much it would just kind of depend on the game, but I would just make sure that I was always ready, body wise, if they asked me to start throwing, or if I had to get hot right away. I was ready.
It's funny you say that. I was on a call with Adam Warren yesterday, and he was talking about, they had asked him a question about Aroldis Chapman, what it's like, how he is in the bullpen, and they asked literally the same question. And Chapman knows he's going to pitch the 9th inning, but coming out of the tunnel in the 4th or 5th inning, he's wearing his turtleneck, he's drenched in sweat. He doesn't even know if he's going to pitch that day. So it's about staying ready. So I'm glad you touched upon that. Mm-hmm. Backtracking into college, obviously you got to play in some pretty big name schools. What was your favorite stadium to pitch in, or least favorite stadium to pitch in, or the fans heckled you and that kind of stuff? And how did you deal with fan heckling if that happened to you?
My most favorite stadium was probably the University of Florida, just because it had the biggest crowd, and it was the biggest stadium that I had thrown in. And thankfully I had seen some success during my start to not make me hate the place. But that was honestly probably one of the best places I've thrown. But we played UCF every year, University of Central Florida, and so that had the most fans heckling, and I was the most comfortable there, because I had thrown there so much outside of my home field. But the fan heckling, I never really heard it. It's kind of different, me being a pitcher, because I'm kind of locked in and focused on just throwing strikes and trying to get guys out, that I'm not really hearing anything from the crowd. But after the innings, some of your buddies will come up to you and say, they were saying this, they were saying this. Well, really at the end of your outing, not in the middle of your outing, but at the end, you kind of ask them, like, what were they saying? Like, I didn't hear anything. So anything funny? And sometimes they would get you on a few things, but for the most part, I didn't really hear them.
That's awesome. We got a question from Coach John Scheibel. What's the best piece of advice you received as a high school player or college player to prepare you for where you are now?
I would say it's kind of like a quote for me personally. It's um, when if your team was asked who's the hardest working person in the room, um, everybody should point to you. And so I had taken that to heart and taken that really seriously. It's no matter where I go, I need to be the hardest working player on any team at any level. It doesn't really matter. And so I pride myself on my work ethic and my routines to help prepare me for the season and in season, preparing me for my next outings. So working harder than everybody that you're around. I mean, if you're a sophomore, you have a freshman who's coming for your job. If you're a senior, you have a junior coming for your job. And so it's the same thing in pro ball. I mean, all the new draftees, whenever the draft is going to happen this year, they're coming for my job. And so I need to make sure that I'm on top of my game and on top of my work so that I do have a job by the end of the year and I don't lose out on anything.
That's awesome. That's a good question there. Now, another one. Obviously, you made friends and stuff along the way. Do you keep in touch with some of your friends from Mayapack? I'm a Carmel guy, so we played in the same league.
Okay.
What's your friend relationship with some of your friends back home or some of your friends from Siena? What's that like?
Yeah, I mean, I'm super close with all my friends back home still. I mean, I'm talking to them every day, just as I'm kind of talking to a lot of my teammates on a pretty daily or consistent basis. I always try and keep in touch with everybody who I come across, especially, I mean, as to be friends, of course, but there are also some connections that you might make and you might need later on. So, never burning any bridges, I guess. So I always try and keep in touch with everybody, or the people that I get super close with.
Nice. Is there anybody now with the Tigers that you kind of look up to or connect with, other than your teammates, or is it a teammate? Is it a catcher? What do you look for in a person to kind of trust them and all that kind of stuff?
For me personally, it's whatever somebody's doing with themselves, I guess, whatever their ambition is. I kind of like to see how much they dedicate themselves to it. So, I mean, it's just a test of character for me personally. I mean, if I see somebody who is really going after his dreams and he's really pursuing his ambitions, that's somebody I feel that I can trust because I'm doing the same thing. That's the type of character and the type of person that I'd want to be around anyway. Those are the type of people that I'd want to surround myself with. I've heard it 100 times. You are the average of the 5 closest people that you surround yourself with. And so, I try and surround myself with people who I look up to and people I want to be more like.
I want to also bring this up too. Your biggest supporter. What kind of pushed you? Who was your backbone? Who pushed you?
It would have to be my family. My family really, my mother and my father really put me or gave me all the support that I could ever need or ask for, to help me pursue my dreams and pursue this. We never had any issues with, they knew what I wanted to do, and thankfully they did everything that they could to help propel me in this direction. And so their support has been absolutely incredible. I mean, I can't thank them enough for everything that they have done for me now and what they're going to be doing for me in the future. I'm not ready to move out yet.
I hear you. Now I want to ask, describe your feeling in the dugout. At the D1 level, at the pro level. You mentioned, guys are coming after your job, but what is it like in terms of teammates, encouraging you? They're not putting you down. What is that ultimately like at that level?
I mean, the biggest thing that I noticed with pro ball is when you're playing baseball, they're there to work. They're there to get promoted to the next level. So when we're on the field, everybody is very focused on their task at hand and what they're doing. So support from your teammates, obviously, while you're doing that is always huge. So encouragement from the other pitchers on the staff, or, if you're a hitter, the other guys in the lineup. So, I mean, that's always huge. And ultimately, everything is easier when you're off the field to just relax. I mean, everybody's normal. Everybody's a different person. But on the field, everybody has a pretty distinct focus on knowing that they need to take their job seriously and get their job done. Or, like they said, somebody's going to be coming after the job.
Nice. Now, when you're on the mound, obviously you're going to have your good days, you're going to have your bad days. Your teammates are going to make, some errors behind you. Kind of take us through that mindset, and try to explain to our guys that you can't get upset, because if you start getting upset or you start getting mad, you start trying to overdo things, and you're not yourself. So you're not throwing strikes anymore. So kind of take us through that mindset, and what mentality do you have to have, or what kind of skin, tough skin you have to have in order to, be successful after something like that happens.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest focus is controlling what I can control, which obviously comes down to my process and what I'm doing pitch to pitch. So if an error happens in the field, I mean, you can't get upset or it doesn't make any sense to get upset because it's not your fault. There's nothing that you could have done that would have changed it. And so if you worry about controlling all the factors in a game, you're not focused on the one task at hand, which is to throw a strike. And so keeping the negative thoughts out in terms of errors in the field or anything outside of your control, super important. And I think it really just comes down to your focus on the next pitch, because you don't want to get it too ahead of yourself in terms of focusing about the next inning or the next batter or whatever it is. Your most important focus is the next pitch that you're going to throw. So if you just I kind of rally around that thought process of what pitch I'm going to be throwing. I'm going to go execute it. Where am I throwing it? And kind of like just the quick thoughts, pitch to pitch like that, kind of prevent you from worrying too much about other stuff or who you're facing next and the errors in the field behind you.
That's some good stuff. Actually, Adam Warren literally said the same thing as you. You got to focus on the next pitch. Do what you do. Control the controllables, just like you said. During a bad outing, you see, the call to the bullpen, guys are starting to warm up. Manager or coach is coming to talk to you. Kind of explain that, what the manager or coach says to you. Is it something strategic, or what are some cues that kind of help get you back on point? Or is it something baseball related, or is it something that just to kind of get your focus out and kind of relax? What is that?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a few different pitching coaches who actually are back and forth on this. My pitching coach in college was always strategic about the most important pitch is the next pitch. So let's go after this guy. Let's get him a fastball. We'll throw him a fastball, get ahead of the count, and we'll work our way moving forward. So sometimes if we had a scouting report on the guy, because you don't want to get it too ahead of yourself in terms of what pitch you're going to throw to get guys out. But if you know that a guy is susceptible to a slider in the dirt or an off-speed pitch low, let's say, all right, let's get strike one. And when, strike two comes, because we're going to get there, let's go to a slider. Let's go to a curveball down. And we'll get this guy out and we'll be out of this inning. So let's go. We got it. So, all positive support, just as if a catcher was saying it. But then on the other side, I had another pitching coach who would come out and he would tell you jokes. So, some of the things that he would say, the most classic one is, why do the White Sox wear black socks? And so when you're on the mound, you're like, what the hell is this guy talking about? What is he saying? And so you kind of just like take a step back, or I guess away from yourself or away from the situation that you're in. And then you can kind of identify, okay, well, now that I'm away from it, I can relax, I can focus, and I can go do my job. So, I mean, I guess it really goes back and forth on the type of coach that you have, and I guess the relationship that you have with your players. And if the player wants that, if the player wants those jokes, or if they want strategy. So I guess it all really depends.
Yeah, basically just go out there and have some fun and enjoy it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We got another question from one of our staff members. As a pitcher, what was your go-to pitch to get a strikeout, or just an out in general? What was your go-to pitch to get a strike in a 2-0 or 3-0 count? Obviously, you don't want to serve up a fastball right down the middle to a guy can hit it 400 feet. How do you go about that?
Yeah. So, honestly, the biggest thing that put me in a position to get drafted was the development of my slider, because that is what really helped boost my strikeout rate, and I was able to punch a lot more guys out per outing and just over the course of a season because I had that pitch to go to. So my slider was definitely my strikeout pitch, and I wish I had learned it a little bit sooner, I guess, because I learned it going into my junior year. So I wish I had developed that swing and miss pitch earlier in my career because of how successful it was in the most important year that I had for college. And then my 2-0, 3-0 count go-to pitch was probably my curveball. I had the most confidence in being able to just drop that in there. Typically, guys weren't swinging for the fences, especially at 3-0. But 2-0, 2-0, 3-0, 2-1 count where guys are looking for one pitch to hit, and it's usually not a curveball. I would drop in the curveball.
Now, I want to ask you, I don't know if you remember, but is there a guy you loved facing because you just absolutely knew that you would dominate him? Or is there a guy that you hated facing because you knew he was going to get a hit off you and you just couldn't get him out?
Yeah. I don't know if it was types of or it wasn't a specific player as much. It was, I guess, like the types of players. I wasn't a small righty who would stand really far up on the plate. It was difficult for me to throw my sinkers and two seams in on him. So that wasn't a guy that I liked facing too much. Off speed stuff, was normal to throw, but it was really like trying to get inside on those guys that, was really difficult. So I'd rather not face them if I have the opportunity, but always going to. So I just got to figure out my way to get in there.
Anyone else have any questions? I don't want to hold up Brendan too much. But if anybody has any questions, make sure you put it in the chat. Mike, Bill, anybody?
I just, being a big baseball fan, I miss it. And I was just wondering if you had any inside information for us as to when we might be getting baseball back.
I know about as much as Twitter does. So, I'm really hearing that. Well, we're actually about to find out this week, apparently. Within the next week, there's going to be some news about what the major league teams plan on doing. But so far, we've heard that June 12th is when spring training would start back up for the big league guys. And then July 1st would be the opening day for all the big league teams. Minor leagues, there are no word on the minor leagues right now. So I don't know if we're playing or I personally don't think we're going to play, but we don't know just because of how much trouble they're having with figuring out the major league guys. We don't make enough money for them to really worry about, I guess. But we'll all find out whatever they have planned for us.
Now, what do you do now to, stay ready, not knowing if you're going to play or not? What are some workouts, or do you just go through your normal, typical routine as if you were in season?
Yeah, and so that's what we're doing. We have a lifting program that would be a little bit more rigorous than an in-season one just because we're not playing at the moment, but we haven't specifically dedicated our exercises towards like specific, say, mass gaining where it's a lot of heavy weight or just pure speed work to get faster. We're kind of in the middle ground where it's just maintenance exercises, but our overall volume of workouts is going up just because we're not throwing as much. We don't have the load of games on us. But throwing wise, it's just kind of like I keep it as like a start routine, I guess. So I have bullpens on Fridays and throwing flat grounds and, kind of working on some velocity development and just really focusing on some mechanic work in the week and just kind of trying to treat it as much of an in-season program or schedule as I can.
Oh, nice. We got another question from John Scheibel. We hear stories about life in the minors. What is it like in the GCL? Like what surprised you?
Yeah, it's definitely a grind. I mean, the schedule that we were on was I was getting up at 6 a.m. every morning, and I was in the locker room at 6:45, and so pretty much I would be there from 6:45 to about 3 or 4 p.m. So always long days, depending on what I had to do. So if I was in the locker room at 6:45, I was having breakfast till about 7, going to get my lift in that morning. So whatever I had to do based on my exercises for that day. If I had early work at 8 o'clock or at 8:30, bullpens. So the day kind of gets, I guess, kind of broken up. So you're always doing something. But I mean, they're long days and not much changes other than the team that you're playing. Being in the GCL, I mean, which it's different in the upper levels, but for us it was a grind.
Nice. We have a request from Jackson Scheibel. He wants to ask a question himself. So
Okay.
Mike, can you unmute Jackson?
No, you're not. No, go.
What's your favorite baseball movie?
Ooh, I'm a big Sandlot guy. Love the Sandlot.
Sandlot 2.
I haven't seen the Sandlot 2, but the original Sandlot is the one that I love.
No, he meant to say his is the favorite. Sandlot.
Oh. Oh, perfect.
Good question, Jackson. Good question.
My bad.
Hey, Bobby, can you hear me?
Yep. This is our head coach, Bill.
It's not really a question, but I remember, I don't know what year it was. What year did you finish high school?
2016.
16. So it must have been the spring of 16, and I knew Bobby, and Bobby goes, there's a good Carmel pitcher. You should go check him out. Forgot his name, and he winded up not coming to us anyway. But he was undecided between junior college and going 4-year school. And who are they playing? They're playing Mayapack. And I'm going, Bobby, I don't care about the Carmel pitcher. Who's this guy on Mayapack pitching? and it was you, and you were, and I, through the grapevine, I found you were going to Siena, so I was like, that's why I never even spoke to you.
Yeah.
But I always remember that, and then Gene finally goes, he's like my cousin. I know who that is. Yeah, he's going to Siena. I go, tell him to come to us. Don't tell him to come to Siena. He's like, go to Siena for his back 2 years.
That's
but
fun, yeah. I remember that outing pretty clearly. It's funny.
That's a big high school rivalry, Carmel Mayapack.
Yeah. Oh, it definitely is. Big time.
I'm glad to have you on too. 90% of our roster is Section 1 guys.
Right.
Just local guys understand that balls, understanding where it comes from, and it can come from anywhere. You can be from anywhere. But
absolutely,
just to kind of hear your story and your success is awesome. And I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to talk to our guys and talk to our staff about your experiences. I appreciate it.
No, of course. I'm always looking to help out or pass any info that I can. So if anybody needs anything else, I mean, I'm here. So just let me know. I'd love to help.
Yeah. If once we end this, is there anything that you would like to say to our guys to kind of just a word of advice or something just to remember or prep?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say stay focused. Every day that you wake up, have a plan to get better. And work every day at your craft. You only get to play this game for so long, and you never know how long it's going to be. So really, just give everything that you have into it, and and keep on working.
Awesome. Does anybody have any more questions? I think that's a wrap with Brendan, unless anybody has any questions.
It's not another question, but when you said the place you like to play the best was Florida, I played against Florida when I was at Pace. Let me tell you something. We didn't have a big crowd because Pace wasn't a big name SEC school coming in, but they heckle. And that was the most fun I've ever had playing at the Florida Gators field against them. So I was right when you said that.
Yeah,
I
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, some of the stories about our outfielders getting, because those guys will go through people's Twitters and Facebooks and Instagram to figure out their girlfriend's names and their mom's name, and and they'll pull any way that they can to get under your skin. So you never know what you're gonna hear, but I'm willing to bet they find out everything about you. So we always have to make our stuff private before we head out there. But
I always know, because the rules with when Mike, you always say the not necessarily the ground rules, but the fan rules before games.
Mhm.
And I'm like, if you ever told those rules to like the Florida Gator fans, or they would say, "What is that?" Because they heckle you, man. I always remember, and it was comical. Like they were good.
No, and that's the best part. I mean, fans who like say something that's clever, especially to one of your buddies, you're like, how did they know that? Or that's honestly a good chirp. Like, I mean, those make it more fun. I mean, one of my close friends who's now in pro ball, he was a really tall, lanky kid, and so they called him the human noodle. 6'6", 170 pounds, and so that actually became his nickname for the next, or it's been 4 years now. So we just call him Noodle. So like some of the chirps, kind of just stick with you.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, what would you say is your most, memorable moment, whether it was high school, college, or, pro level?
I would probably say that Florida Gators start was pretty big, but also, I mean, it was about a month before the draft. It was my second to last start for the year. We had a lot of scouts come out to the game, and we had 25 or 30 scouts come out. And I had a good game. I had thrown a complete game, and
was that at Marist?
No, definitely not. It wasn't at Marist. That was at home against Niagara. But a lot of scouts came, and so that was a really memorable moment, because I was kind of like, that might have been the outing that got me picked up this year. And it was right before the draft, so you wanted to leave a good image in their mind, and so I did that, and it's pretty memorable.
Yeah, I only brought up Marist because I actually got to see you pitch over there at Dutchess Stadium against Marist. I went with Mickey Ludbauer and Sean McGee.
Oh yeah. Oh, Manhattan. Was that this year?
Oh yeah, sorry, Manhattan. Yes, it was at Dutchess Stadium.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's always fun playing there. It's always a good place to play. And obviously everything was torn up this year because they're going to replace stuff, but it's always a nice park to be in.
Yeah,
and Brendan, Coach John, when you're out in the bullpen, if you're going to be a bullpen pitcher or whatever you're going to be that day, do you concentrate on the batters that are actually hitting in that game to see what they're doing, or do you rely on your catcher to help you if you have to get out on the mound?
No, I'm always paying attention. I mean, you have to know who the hot guys are. Not necessarily who's the third or fourth batter in the lineup, because those are obviously some of the better players, but the 7 batter could be 3 for 3.
Right.
So honestly, really just being focused and watching the whole game, because the catcher may have obviously has a different view than I do, but I might notice something where I think my slider can get this guy. So I kind of build my own game plans around some of the stuff that I see, so that if I do get in the game and I do face that guy, I kind of already have a plan going in that I don't really need to think about. So definitely watching the batters while I'm in the pen is big.
Between you and your catcher, do you concentrate on the hitters, their stances and how they stand at the plate for you to pitch to them?
Yeah, I mean, there's actually a lot of cues to try and pick apart hitters based on the way they're standing, or there's some really deep stuff depending on shin and spine angle. But pretty much, some guys who maybe crouched typically like fastballs that are higher because based on their stance. So kind of recognizing that stance, I could throw fastballs lower. Or guys who are deep in the box obviously are looking for fastballs because it gives them more time. So then you could throw a curveball or a slider because it'll break more before it gets to them. There's like little different cues based on the way the batter is standing that I can kind of identify and then go and attack. But that's still something I'm really trying to learn and develop. I haven't been able to put it into practice as much. I mean, I planned on doing it this year, but haven't really gotten the chance. So that's really a big development piece for me moving forward is that.
Are you working on any new pitches from college?
No new pitches as much as I'm trying to refine and kind of develop really my changeup more. I hadn't used it as much as I should have or could have. So I've been spending a lot of time developing that so that I have it moving forward in the future, and that's just another weapon that I can rely on. But I'm really just at the moment refining all of my pitches, but I'm putting a lot of emphasis on my changeup.
Good luck,
Is
Brian.
that something that you personally want to do, or is that something, you know, the Tigers say, hey, you should work on this, or how does that go?
Yeah, so it happened to be both. So I had known that was something I needed to develop moving forward if I wanted to continue to be successful. You know, I had to develop that as another weapon in my arsenal. But going down to Lakeland, I was able to get on a Rapsodo to get all of my data and my reports based on my pitch movement and my pitch profiles. And so I had sat down and talked with the analytics team about what I can do to help improve my pitches and what do they think works and what doesn't work. And so we came to the conclusion that my changeup could use more horizontal break, so it could run more side to side. So I had that piece going into my off season where, okay, you know, this is something that I can work on. It's a good pitch, so I shouldn't just scrap it. But this is what I should try and make it do. And so the analytics and data supported that. And so that was kind of my plan at the time moving into the season, but it's what I'm doing now.
Cool, that's cool. Any other questions before we wrap it up, Brendan? I think that's it. That's all we got. I mean, Mike.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to Brendan. Really appreciate you joining us tonight, giving our guys some advice. And you know, I know as they continue their college careers, baseball will be back again, and you know, we want to see them be successful at WCC, and hopefully move on to a four-year school where they may have opportunities similar to the ones you got, both academically and athletically. So thanks a lot for taking the time.
Of course, absolutely. I mean, I love being able to help out. I want to see them be in my shoes at some point. So it'd be great.
Thank you, Brendan.
Thank you, Brendan, and we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
Stay in touch.
Will do.
Thank you.
And if you guys need anything, questions, if anything comes up after the call, I mean, you have my number, so feel free to reach out.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you.
See you guys.
All right, guys.
Thanks, Brendan.
Thank you. Bye.